Hello, World History 1 students. This is Mr. Everton, and today's bit notes are slightly different. They were done by a student. Her name is Alex, and she is very interested in the Black Death, which is the topic of today's bit notes, and had a lot of knowledge about that, did some research, and prepared, and I said that she could record today's bit notes. I hope you will find them informative and helpful.
World History 1 students, I'm Alex, and this is a video in our unit on the High Middle Ages. So, you may be wondering, where did the name the Black Death come from? It is believed that it came from a symptom where the lumps on the skin turned black, but it is actually from a later historian's terrible mistranslation of the Latin phrase for terrible death. But it was 1616. They didn't have Google Translate. Ask in the chat for him. The main question here is, how did the Black Death change Europe? Well, first we have to ask, where did the Black Death come from? First of all, completely decimated the population wherever it spread. As you see here, there were so many people dead that they were just throwing people into large graves, burning them on the street. They didn't really even know what to do. A lot of the time it would be from 30 to 60% of the population, sometimes more, sometimes less. Here is a map showing the trade routes. Before the Black Death came to Europe, people were already hearing about it being in places such as China, India, Syria, Egypt, and so forth. And it spread to Europe in October of 1347 when 12 ships arrived at the Sicilian port in Messina. A lot of the sailors on the ships were already dead, and the few left were already infected with the bacteria, with the plague. So it decimates the population, came from East Asia, and spread through trade. Here we have an example of a deliberate spread of the disease when the Mongols used trebuchets to launch corpses who had died from the Black Plague over the walls of the city of Kaffa, which is located in modern-day Ukraine. This is actually the first recorded incident of biological warfare. Overall, pretty epic. So the official bacteria of the plague is Yersinia pestis. So fleas would get that from, here's the official process. So a farmer would be tending his beef, dough-to-dough. Here I am, a farmin', minding my own business, circa 1347. And then you would have the trade spreading the plague. There'd be a dead rat infected with that plague. The fleas would be like, munch, munch, time for lunch. Get on that farmer, and blurg, he would die. And rats were actually, they loved medieval peasant houses because they had thatched roofs, and that's kind of perfect climate for rats. And here is a map showing where and when it spread. So you may be wondering, Alex, what if I was bored on the weekend, or school was too much for me and I wanted a new hobby, and I decided to get a little bit of that Yersinia pestis? Well, it would be pretty awful. First, you would get buboes, lumps on the skin filled with pus. They would eventually open and turn black, and all the pus would come out. Ooh, and they can be walnut sized to orange sized. Really gross overall. You would have chills, vomiting, diarrhea, everything unpleasant that could happen would happen. Caused death to 2 to 7 days, was highly infectious. Highly infectious. Cannot stress enough how highly infectious it is, and affected 1/3 of Europeans at the time. Here's a great quote from Giovanni Boccaccio. That's how you pronounce that. Quote me on that. Wives deserted their husbands. Fathers and mothers refused to nurse and assist their own children. If you were in a room with someone who had the plague, you would die. If you breathe the same air as them, death. Like priests who were praying for people and doctors who were trying to heal people, they would end up dying too. Very, very contagious. So, how did the Black Death disrupt this society? First of all, most of the peasants died. So that caused the feudal system to be disrupted there from the bottom. And that caused a labor shortage and a famine. People didn't have any food because all the farmers were dying. And that ended up people valuing farmers and labor more and giving the farmers alive, better wages. So that really helped the decline of the feudal system. Here we have a plague doctor costume. The mask is pretty infamous. The beak was mainly for trying to distill the air or have the air a farther passage to the nose and mouth. And also during this time, people who weren't dying of the plague, there was a dancing mania. People would dance and dance for days on end because they were so happy that they were alive. And Ring Around the Rosie, Pocket Full of Posies. That song is about the plague. So all this death caused a disrupt in trade. You can't trade with people who are dying of the plague. You can't trade if you're dying of the plague. And it also caused a lot of anti-Semitism at the time. People didn't have any excuses for why this was happening to them. They weren't like, oh, I am showing symptoms of the plague. It's Bacterium Yersinia pestis. They had no logic in this matter. And a lot of mobs were happening at the time, and they were burning Jewish people, again, for no logical reason. It also weakened the Catholic Church. A lot of flagellants here would whip themselves in public, trying to atone for the sins of the country. They thought that it was the wrath of an angry God. They didn't really have any reasoning for it. So they thought God was just punishing them all for being sinners. So people would try to fix that by whipping themselves vigorously in public. Wasn't really nice. No one liked it. I'm pretty sure they didn't like it. So, summary, Black Death came from East Asia, spread through trade, decreased the population, and weakened feudalism in the Catholic Church. But even though there was this huge time of misery and just overall just sadness and melancholy, and people were whipping themselves in the streets, it also allowed for many great periods and times, many military inventions, many inventions overall, and it allowed for eras like the Renaissance and other great periods in time to happen.